Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Any moment, the president will leave the White House, board Air Force One, and make his way to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, leaving on a night when there's breaking news in the Russia investigation. Then we'll get to that breaking news in a moment. A short time ago, the president spoke with reporters for about 15 minutes, covering topics including immigration, his feelings about the FBI, and, yes, the Russia investigation. Here's what he said about the prospect of speaking with special counsel Robert Mueller.
Are you going to talk to Mueller?
I'm looking forward to it, actually.
You want to?
Do you have a date set?
Here's the story, just so you understand.
Set,
There's
Mr.
been no
President?
collusion whatsoever. There's no obstruction whatsoever.
Do you have a date set, Mr. President?
I don't know. No, I guess they're talking about 2 or 3 weeks, but I would love to do it.
In person.
You know, again, I have to say, subject to my lawyers and all of that, but I would love to do it.
Would you do it under oath, Mr. President?
You mean like Hillary did it under? Who said that?
I said that.
Oh.
Would you do it under oath?
You said it. You did say it. You say a lot. Did Hillary do it under oath?
I have no idea, but I'm not asking.
I think you have an idea. Don't you have an idea?
Do you think
Wait a minute. Wait. Do you not have an idea? Do you really not have an idea? I'll give you an idea. She didn't do it under oath, but I would do it
voluntary
under
interview.
oath. Listen,
You would.
But I would do it, and you know she didn't do it under oath, right?
She would do it under oath.
If you didn't do it, if you didn't know about Hillary, then you're not much of a reporter.
So you're going to do under oath?
Say it.
To reach a higher standard, you would do it under oath.
Oh, I would do it under oath.
Do you think Robert Mueller will be fair to you in this larger investigation?
We're going to find out.
Has Mueller actually
We're going to
Are
find
you
out.
concerned about it?
Because here's what we'll say, and everybody says, no collusion. There's no collusion. Now they're saying, oh, well, did he fight back? If you fight back, is that
what is
obstruction?
collusion? There's no
You fight
collusion
back,
meeting,
John.
Mr. President.
You fight back. Oh, it's obstruction. So here's the thing. I hope so.
So how do you define collusion? And Maggie asked this earlier during the briefing to Sarah, but how do you...
You're going to define it for me, okay? But I can tell you, there's no collusion. I couldn't have cared less about Russians having to do with my campaign. The fact is, you people won't say this, but I'll say it. I was a much better candidate than her. You always say she was a bad candidate. You never say I was a good candidate. I was one of the greatest candidates. Nobody else would have beaten the Clinton machine, as crooked as it was. But I was a great candidate. Someday you're going to say that. Goodbye, everybody.
The president there saying he's looking forward to speaking with Robert Mueller under oath. And tonight we have new reporting on the specifics of the arrangements for an interview between Mueller and the president. Mueller, CNN is learning from sources familiar with the matter, has given lawyers for the president a range of topics he may want to ask about as part of ongoing negotiations regarding an interview. Mueller's team has also made clear it is seeking a sit-down interview with the president, according to these sources. This is reporting from Gloria Borger and Pamela Brown, who join us now. So, Pamela, what do we know about the state of negotiations between the president's team and the Mueller team?
Well, they're ongoing negotiations, but sources tell my colleague Gloria Borger and I that Robert Mueller, special counsel Robert Mueller, has made it clear to the president's legal team that he wants to do a sit-down interview with the president. You heard there the president say today here at the White House, I was there in the room, he said he would be more than happy to sit down and talk to Robert Mueller. But the lawyers for the president are in ongoing negotiations, and sources tell us that an in-person interview would really be a last resort. Now, we're told that Robert Mueller has also made clear some of the topics he would like to discuss in any potential interview with the president under the umbrella of the firing of former FBI Director James Comey and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, looking more specifically at the president's reaction to James Comey's May testimony. You may remember our reporting then that his testimony angered the president, and then shortly after James Comey was fired, they also want to learn more about what he told James Comey in the Oval Office when he allegedly asked him to let the Michael Flynn probe go, to drop the probe. And also another topic we're told by sources that Robert Mueller is interested in is when the president reached out to the intelligence chiefs of various agencies, including DNI and CIA, asking them allegedly, reportedly, to intervene in the Russia probe and to come out publicly and say there was no collusion. As you know, Anderson, we've reported that Robert Mueller has interviewed 3 of the top intelligence officials so far. So these are some of the things that are on the negotiating table. But it is worth noting that sources tell us most of the topics right now that Robert Mueller has conveyed he's interested in, his team has conveyed, fall under the obstruction of justice umbrella. But that doesn't mean that Robert Mueller isn't interested in topics under collusion. All this would have to be worked out, and that is being worked out as we speak.
Gloria, and the president's saying tonight he is willing to testify under oath. Is that also the position of Trump's lawyers?
Not necessarily. I think what you maybe see going on here is kind of a good cop, bad cop routine. I think the president clearly wants it known that he has nothing to hide, and therefore publicly saying, I'm willing to testify, subject to the advice of my lawyers. And what our reporting shows is that many of his lawyers, most of his lawyers, don't want him to testify in the way the president would like to testify. There may be an outlier or two in that group, but what they're trying to do is say to Mueller, look, isn't there some way we can do written answers to questions? And if that isn't enough, maybe then we could make the president available to you. And they, of course, point to the precedent of Ronald Reagan during Iran-Contra, where he just answered questions in writing.
So that's the advice that the president is getting from his attorneys. Do we know about it from his closest friends?
Well, I've talked to one of his friends, actually, who surprised me. He said, look, the president wants to testify. He said that he believes, and here's the quote, he doesn't have 1 ounce of culpability. He said most of his friends are telling him not to testify. But this one friend said to me, I told him, look, you've done this plenty of times before. What have you got to lose here? You'll tell the truth.
Interesting. Gloria, Pamela Brown, thanks. Gloria, stay with us. I want to bring in Jeffrey Toobin, Michael Zeldin, David Chalian as well. Jeff, I mean, the president's comments tonight about speaking to the special counsel seemed to agree to a lot. Then came some pretty big caveats.
Yeah, I mean, the big caveat, of course, was subject to what my lawyers say or subject to consultations with my lawyers. You know, it is one thing to agree in theory to testifying under oath, but when you say you're going to defer to your lawyers, that basically takes back the whole concession. There are lots of subjects that need to be settled, issues that need to be settled. You know, how long the interview would be. Would it be under oath or not? What subjects would be covered? Who would be present? Would a transcript be taken? All of these issues need to be resolved. And the president's statement today certainly was designed to make it look like he feels he has nothing to hide. But I don't think anyone should conclude from the president's statement that it's somehow a done deal that he's going to testify in this investigation. I think it's likely he will give testimony in some form. But the parameters of that are very much unsettled.
Michael, are the negotiations between the president's legal team and his special counsel affected when the president speaks, off the cuff like this?
I would think so, yes, because it puts them in a very difficult position. They are trying to negotiate all the things that Jeffrey Toobin just outlined. And now here's the president saying, I'm all in. Let me have it. I've got nothing to hide. So Mueller should say to Ty Cobb and John Dowd, good, your client is all ready to go. We're all ready to go. Let's do it in the map room on Tuesday with a court reporter, and we'll settle this thing. And I think that the unscripted appearance of the president talking about this had to make his lawyers a bit nuts, because it's very hard to walk this back in a sense, because he says, I want to do it. Mueller says, I want to do it. Then he says, well, you know what? My lawyers told me not to do it. So the question that invites is, why? Why would you not do it? Why did they tell you not to do it? Because they think that I may put myself in jeopardy if I do that. Well, what is there to be putting yourself in jeopardy to if there's no collusion and there's no obstruction? So it's a bad outcome for the president to have done this, I think, ultimately.
David, I mean, what message do you think the president's comments send to his allies? Do they now endorse the idea of the president speaking to Mueller under oath, or do they kind of say, well, look, it's a good sign that he wants to, but he should listen to the lawyers?
I guess it's how we define allies, right? I am sure that his allies on Capitol Hill, like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, would like him to simply just say, I want this to come to a swift and fair conclusion and be done with it, and not do so much off-the-cuff talking about it. We saw in our most recent poll, Anderson, that nearly 8 in 10 Americans say that if Mueller asks for him to testify under oath, that he should do so. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, majorities of all across parties think that that is different than what we've seen on other questions related to the investigation where partisanship really drives the answer. Here, it's nearly unanimous with 8 in 10 Americans agreeing he should testify under oath if he's asked to do so.
Gloria, I mean, what motivation does Mueller have for giving into any of these requests by the president's legal team? Ultimately, he has subpoena power. He could play hardball if he needs to.
He could. And I think that they've had a good relationship. You know, the president's attorneys and Mueller's team have been talking for months now. They've handed over all the documents that Mueller has asked for. It's gone pretty smoothly. And I think Mueller is not the kind of guy who wants to play gotcha, particularly with the President of the United States. So I think he would like this to go smoothly because don't forget, there are all these charges out there about how this investigation is tainted. And I think that's not what Mueller wants. He wants to kind of have conversations that are very much on the up and up. But I do believe, and our reporting, Pamela's and my reporting today, is that Mueller has flat out said to the Trump team that I want your client in a face-to-face interview. Right. And now that the client has said that he wouldn't mind doing it, I wonder what the conversations are going to be
Yeah.
like tomorrow.
Jeff, I mean, do you agree with that? That if Mueller insisted on, on everything he wanted, that could reflect badly on him, and that it would give ammunition to the president's allies to further attack him?
The president's allies don't need much reason to attack Mueller. I mean, this is a very partisan moment. But this does seem like, unlike so many problems in American life, a soluble problem. I mean, both sides want to get this whole issue behind them. They want to have him make a give an interview. It sounds like the president is willing to do it. There are a lot of details to be worked out, but I don't think a court fight is in the interest of either one of them. Yes, it's true that if they come to loggerheads, the president, the Mueller could just simply give a grand jury subpoena and then they could fight it out in court. But, the president is not just an ordinary witness. He is a constitutional officer. He has certain rights that are different from any other person's rights, and it's a complicated legal question about how to treat him as a witness. So I think Mueller recognizes that yes, he'd probably win in court in some way at some point, but it's in his interest to wrap this thing up as well. So I think this is very likely to come to an agreement about some sort of testimony.
Michael, it was interesting to hear the president tonight saying that, look, when you fight back, then they call that obstruction. That he's referring or kind of, I guess, saying everything he did in terms of, the relations with Flynn or Comey or any of that was in some form fighting back.
Well, so the obstruction of justice statute is a statute that is based on the intentions of the actor. Was the president, in doing what he did, intending to obstruct justice, or was he intending to fight back as is his rights under the Constitution? And Mueller will have to evaluate all of the things that he did and determine whether this is fighting back or this is obstructionist behavior. That's why you need to look the witness in the eye in a face-to-face environment and ask him these questions and not have anything be a written lawyer response to a question that is propounded by the special counsel. And I think that if I were Mueller, as we did in our independent counsel investigation, when we took Herbert Walker Bush's testimony, we were very deferential to his schedule, to where the interview would take place, to when it would take place, whether we needed to do it over 1 day or 2 days to accommodate his schedule, all of that stuff. But we wouldn't negotiate the scope of our questioning or our desire to have it be under oath and in person. And I think that Mueller has the easy opportunity here to say, let's do it the way Ken Starr did it with Bill Clinton in the map room, under oath, under, if you will, on your home turf, and be done with it.
David, I know.
Anderson,
sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I just think, you pinpointed a very important point. The president has said a lot of things, but the first time he used the term fight back was today. And I think that is a real tell to what the defense to any charge of obstruction of justice is going to be. Because he is going to say, I fired James Comey not to interfere with the investigation, but to fight back against a conspiracy of anti-Trump people, including the director of the FBI, the deputy director, Andy McCabe, and I was using my powers of the presidency and my First Amendment rights as a citizen to fight back against that conspiracy. I wasn't obstructing justice. We'll see whether Mueller or anyone else buys that argument, but this was the first time we heard that argument, and I think we're going to hear it plenty over the next few weeks.
David, I know that fighting back comment really jumped out to you as well.
Yeah, it did. Also, for the reasons Jeffrey stated, as it's a preview to the defense, perhaps, but also it sounded to my ear like, oh, the president is in a PR street fight here instead of a deadly serious investigation. He seemed to want to shift the terms of this, and that's why it perked up my ear. I wondered if he really envisioned himself in a more of a PR battle than in a serious legal matter.
But you can also fight back and obstruct justice at the same time. I mean, one does not preclude the other. And I think what Donald Trump's lawyers are trying to do is to get a roadmap, and they got sort of a roadmap from Mueller, according to our reporting, about the general areas. But I think what they would like is the written questions in advance of the test, and I don't think they're going to get that.
Yeah. I want to thank everybody. Coming up, much more from President Trump's chat with reporters before heading to Davos, the audio recording after he fired James Comey. Did he ask the acting director of the FBI how he voted in the 2016 election? You're going to hear the president's response to that question and, of course, our reporting. Also, the president's latest demands for a DACA deal. We'll talk it over with Senator Bernie Sanders, who joins us ahead.
You think I'm crazy?
A monster unleashed.
My God.
A man obsessed.
He's watching us.
A city in fear. Mondays on TNT, the hunt for pure evil begins.
Cold-blooded killers walk among us.
Based on the best-selling novel, Daniel Bruhl, Luke Evans, and Dakota Fanning.
What compels a man to do evil?
The Alienist, new limited series Mondays at 9, 8 central on TNT.
Well, breaking news tonight, President Trump chatting with reporters for about 15 minutes tonight before leaving for Davos, Switzerland. The president answering questions on everything from the Russia investigation to immigration. Didn't hold back when he was asked about Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI he's been at odds with. Here's the audio of that.
Should McCabe go?
Well, McCabe got more than $500,000 from essentially Hillary Clinton. And is he investigating Hillary Clinton?
So should he go?
Do you remember, did anybody hear many of my speeches where I talked about McCabe? He was the star of my speech. This isn't now. And I said, a man who was more or less in charge of her, the wife got $500,000. I mean,
do you regret having him as your acting FBI director then?
You know what? I keep out of it. You'd find that hard to believe. I keep out of it. That's the way it fell. He's been there.
Did you ask McCabe who he voted for? Did you ask him that?
I don't think so. No.
You don't think?
No, I don't think I did.
You don't?
You did not.
I don't know what's the big deal with that, because I would ask you who did you vote for? I don't think it's a big deal, but I don't remember that. I saw that this morning. I don't remember asking him that question.
Is it possible you did?
I don't remember asking him the question.
You don't remember?
I think it's also a very unimportant question.
Joining me now is CNN senior political commentator Jennifer Granholm, the former Democratic governor of Michigan, and the former RNC chief of staff, Mike Shields. Mike, you heard the president, not exactly a denial, just saying he doesn't seem to recall whether or not he asked that question, doesn't recall asking it. Would it be appropriate if he did ask the acting director of the FBI who he voted for?
Yeah, I don't know. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I mean, in some ways, we don't ask lots of people who they voted for. But when you have people that are senior people in your administration, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to figure out who they are, where they stand. You're making decisions on who you're putting in charge of things. I think he has a pretty good idea of where the rest of his cabinet stands.
Even if they're career civil servants, we're not talking about people actually in the working around the president in the White House.
Right, but I think as he alluded to, part of the reason he probably thinks he got off easy, but that's what he asked him, right? That he could have gone a lot further considering what he knew about and what he suspected about who McCabe was and what he was and wasn't doing and as a part of his investigation. I mean, let's keep in mind what has not been fully flushed out in the investigation. The entire Clinton Foundation and all the money they were taking from people around the world, the emails that were deleted as a part of her server, there's a lot of things that were not fully investigated. When you have someone at the FBI that you know has some ties to Clinton, there's some questions that can be raised there. So him asking a question like that, I think from his perspective, he's sort of like taking a shot and making sure this guy knows I'm paying attention. But to say that's something you shouldn't do, if it didn't seem to go any further than that, and he said, look, I've left him there, I try to stay out of it. So I think we're making a lot about a question here.
Governor Granholm, is this much ado about nothing?
No, it is totally inappropriate to be asking a civil servant who's hatched, which means he's not allowed to engage in political activity, who he voted for. It just shows that Trump believes that the Justice Department are his personal attorneys and not serving the country, rather serving him. And can I just say,
there's been no evidence of his actions to prove that.
Well, I mean, there is evidence apparently of him asking it. How else was this question? How else did it arise? This is another example of Trump all of a sudden forgetting what he probably asked. But let me just say, this series of questions today, it gave reporters such a huge array of things to chew on, like we're talking about tonight. This is exactly why his lawyers do not want him to be interviewed by Mueller. Anderson, there was a lawsuit in 2007 where he was deposed, where Donald Trump was deposed. It's 176 pages. He had sued an author of a book he didn't like. So his deposition was taken. In that deposition, he had to admit that he lied 30 times. He was totally unprepared. He was like in this press conference today, all over the map. He does not want to be interviewed by Mueller. And yes, this was an inappropriate question.
Mike, certainly reporters like it when the president, speaks like this extemporaneously for 15 minutes. Do you think it's wise for him to do that? And do you have confidence how he would do if he was under oath speaking with Mueller?
I mean, he's saying he wants to take part. He's saying he wants to be interviewed. And of course, now falling back on, the lawyers won't let him. These are all negotiated things. The scope of it, how long it is, whether or not he's getting written things. We're now part of a sort of a negotiation. I think one of the interesting aspects of this is very recently the word that came out of the White House was this investigation's wrapping up. And pundits jumped on the television and said, no, that's a joke. This thing's going on forever. Now we realize this thing is starting to wrap up. And here's what we know. We know that there has not been a single leak or any kind of evidence that have come out of a very leaky investigation, a very well-run press operation out of the Mueller investigation. There's been no evidence to come out of collusion with Russia.
You think the Mueller investigation has been very leaky? More so than, say, the White House?
I think the Mueller investigation, I'll look forward to reading the book when this is all over of the kind of press operation they ran with the targeted leaks to get news, to force people to talk about certain aspects of it. I think it's been amazing.
You don't know that came from Mueller, though. That might have come from people who had been interviewed by Mueller.
Right.
I think particular...
So my point is, just to finish my point, that there has been no evidence of any collusion. And I think the reason why the president is so confident saying, I will testify, is because, I've said this many times, he was the campaign. He was the campaign manager. He was the strategist. He was the communications director. And so in his mind, he didn't collude with Russia, so how could my campaign have colluded with Russia? This whole thing is absurd. I think he's very confident to go and talk to investigators about that, and now they're just negotiating what the parameters of that testimony
and
will
the
be.
Parameters of that testimony are really revolving around obstruction of justice, less about collusion. And
the president terms it fighting back.
Well, but that's an important point,
let the governor.
I just wanted just to finish the point, and perhaps about his financial dealings with Russia, although that doesn't appear to be in the initial range of questions that Mueller is going to be asking about.
But you're talking about the initial range of questions. He's probably only going to get one shot at actually interviewing the president of the United States. The idea that he's going to, just have one interview and then later on say, I'd like to talk to him again, that seems highly unlikely. Governor.
No, it does seem highly unlikely, but this is why they've got to be super careful about letting him go in, because the minute he starts opening himself up to being challenged on the facts, but being presented with documents that show that he is in fact lying, that opens a whole array of potentially other avenues they can go down. They got to be careful.
Governor Graham,
he's got to be careful.
Mike Schultz, appreciate your time. Just ahead, what the president said about missing text messages from two FBI officials who were briefly on the Mueller investigation. That's ahead.
Hey there, it's Alicia Malone. I'm the host of the Filmstruck podcast, a show made by film lovers for film lovers. We have great conversations with people working behind the scenes in Hollywood movies, like Liz Hannah and Josh Singer. This is an incredible story. It is the very first feature film script for Liz Hannah. She wrote it without knowing if it would ever make the big screen, and then
3 months later, I got a call that Stephen, Tom, and Meryl were all reading it and that they were really thinking about doing it. So that was the best and most terrifying phone call I've ever gotten.
Can you imagine your very first feature film being made by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep? Make sure you subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
There's breaking news tonight in the Russia investigation. You're looking at live pictures, Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base. The president heading to Davos, Switzerland tonight for the World Economic Forum. Amid a lot of news in the Russia investigation. Before he left, the president spoke to reporters about a number of topics, including the FBI, and an issue that some of his allies in Congress and on Fox News have used to fuel some recent conspiracy theories. The issue is missing text messages between two FBI officials, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They were romantically involved, and they sent a bunch of texts during and after the election that included their personal feelings about multiple political figures, including Donald Trump. Strzok was taken off Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation after it was discovered that he had texted some anti-Trump sentiments to Page. Now, the missing months of texts cover December 2016 to May 2017. Here's the audio of what the president said about that tonight.
I do worry when I look at all of the things that you people don't report about with what's happening. If you take a look at, the 5 months worth of missing texts, that's a lot of missing texts. And as I said yesterday, that's prime time. So you do sort of look at that and say, what's going on? You do look at certain texts where they talk about insurance policies or insurance, where they say the kinds of things they're saying.
Do you trust the FBI? Do you trust the FBI?
Well, we're going to see. I am very disturbed, as is the general, as is everybody else that is intelligent. When you look at 5 months, this is the late, great Rosemary Woods, right? With a step, right? This is a large-scale version. 18 minutes. That was 18 minutes. This is 5 months. They say it's 50,000 texts, and it's prime time. That's disturbing.
References to Nixon, Secretary aside, the president keeps repeating that there are 50,000 missing text messages. Keep him honest, that is actually the total number of text messages that the Justice Department Inspector General has reviewed on FBI servers. The number of missing text messages, that is not known. There's that, and there's also new information tonight about those missing messages. Manu Raju has that. He joins me now. So what have you learned?
Yeah, Anderson, a law enforcement official tells CNN that a technical glitch resulted in thousands of FBI phones being affected over that 5-month period in which those 2 FBI agents' texts have gone missing. Now, that affected roughly 10% of the FBI phones, according to this law enforcement official. Now, this seems to have satisfied some on Capitol Hill, including the powerful chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, who believes the FBI's explanation. But other Republicans are pushing back, saying that they're demanding more information, sending letters to the Inspector General and the Justice Department saying there may have been something suspicious that was going on. Now, Anderson, this comes as a number of Republicans are seizing on the text messages themselves, including one that occurred right after Election Day in which the 2 FBI agents were discussing a, quote, secret society in reference to Trump's presidency, having to form one. And now Ron Johnson, who's the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, told me that he spoke to an informant who said that this group was trying to meet off-site to discuss some various issues. Now, when I asked him what this group was about, he acknowledged he did not know, but he said this was an effort he wanted to dig further to understand exactly what this, quote, secret society was about. Now, the top Democrat on that committee, Anderson, tells me tonight that she has not spoken to this FBI informant. That's Claire McCaskill of Missouri. And it comes as Democrats are saying that the Republicans are selectively leaking the context of these text messages in an effort to undercut the Mueller investigation. Shows you the partisan tension that remains over these investigations here on Capitol Hill.
And Manu, I just want to explain to our viewers, they're looking at Marine One there for the president arriving, going to be getting on Air Force One, heading to Davos, Switzerland, with his team. Manu, when you talk about the secret society, were there multiple references to that, or was it only in the one text between Strzok and the woman he was seeing about some, and I believe, I don't have the text in front of me, but words to the effect of, maybe it's time to start up the secret society or something.
Yeah, from what we know, it's that text that occurred right after Election Day. We have actually not seen this text message, Anderson. This is only being relayed to us by Republican members of Congress who have reviewed these text messages, and they're the ones who are characterizing these contents. So until we see these documents in full, we do not exactly know exactly what they're referring to. But it's very clear that the Republicans themselves don't know either, which is what Ron Johnson acknowledged when I asked him that, which is what he said he wants to investigate further, Anderson.
All right, Manu Raju, appreciate that. Joining him now is Congressman Charlie Dent, Republican from Pennsylvania. Congressman, thanks for being with us. You heard Manu's reporting. The Department of Justice says those text messages are missing because of an archival problem affecting some 10% of phones at the FBI between that period. Do you take the Justice Department at its word, or do you share President Trump's suspicions?
No, I accepted the Justice Department's explanation. I think a lot of my colleagues just ought to take a deep breath, be a bit more measured, and I think they ought to step back from some of these conspiracy theories, deep state. I mean, for heaven's sake, sounds like we're talking about the Illuminati, for heaven's sake. So we should be, I think we should be more measured. We have been the party of law enforcement at the state and local level, and we've certainly been supportive of federal law enforcement. We shouldn't be doing things that undermine the American public's confidence in the Justice Department and the FBI at a time like this.
It does seem pretty startling to hear this coming from the Republican side. I mean, talking about, this idea of a deep state, but also, secret societies within the FBI. I mean, it's not the kind of thing, as you point out, traditionally Republicans would be arguing.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 years ago, many of us on the Republican side were appalled by some of the rhetoric being used by some on the left regarding law enforcement in this country. We were mortified about the attacks on police and law enforcement. And, again, I'm just surprised by this 180-degree turn, at least with respect to the FBI. And we have to keep in mind that the FBI, these agents who are in my community, they're out there doing anti-organized crime investigations, certainly counterterrorism investigations, and they put their lives at risk. And we have to keep thinking about that and not try to judge them entirely based on this one investigation that has become very politicized. And I'll tell you, I served as chair of the House Ethics Committee in the last Congress, Anderson. And, when we did investigations, we always did them in a bipartisan manner. I couldn't do anything without the consent of my ranking member. I wish the House Intelligence Committee could do the same. And I'm not blaming anybody here. I'm just saying both sides have to get together. The committee operates in secret, just as the Ethics Committee did. And you basically have to inspire confidence in the investigation by working together. And when things become so polarized and partisan, this is what happens. Things break down, and there's a lot of blaming and name-calling. It's not in anyone's interest.
Yeah, I mean, the president tonight asked point blank if he trusts the FBI. Didn't really answer the question. Didn't say that he did or that he had confidence in them. Are you worried about long-term potential damage to this law enforcement agency, which is, the premier law enforcement agency, if not in the world, certainly in this country?
Well, I'm not sure what the long-term damage will be. I don't want to predict that, but all I can say is that, this is a Republican administration. This is President Trump's director at the FBI, Christopher Wray. It's his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and Rod Rosenstein, the Assistant Attorney General. I mean, these are his people. So to attack his own government just strikes me as kind of unprecedented. I'm not used to a president going after his own department. And that's what I find interesting and a bit baffling.
The president also tonight defended. He said he didn't remember asking Andrew McCabe who he had voted for, but said if he had, he didn't think that was really, and there was no problem with that. Do you believe there was a problem with that? And if you do, can you explain to people why you might have a problem with that?
You mean if asking a civil servant how they voted?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, look, I've been in the U.S. Congress now for nearly 14 years. I can't remember any time I ever asked a civil servant how he or she voted, or for that matter, anybody else who came into my office to talk to me about a given issue. I've never asked. I never really thought it was my business. I guess this speaks to the whole issue of, what are the limits of propriety? I remember a few months ago, the president got in some trouble. He went to a Boy Scout jamboree and gave a kind of a campaign speech to a lot of Boy Scouts. And I've been involved with the Boy Scouts, and I just know that I spoke to a lot of Scouts. And that's something I never did. There are things you just don't do. You just don't cross certain lines. And in this case, I wouldn't have asked a civil servant, a career civil servant, how he voted. It's just very awkward, at the very least, and inappropriate.
Charlie Dent, Congressman Dent, I appreciate your time. Thank you. Ahead on this night of breaking news, President Trump also talked about immigration, speaking specifically about the so-called dreamers, saying, quote, it's going to happen at some point in the future. Question is, does that mean an actual deal? We'll talk to Senator Bernie Sanders in a moment. Continuing with their breaking news in his off-camera session with journalists tonight, President Trump also talked again about immigration and those hundreds of thousands of so-called dreamers, this time, as he has in the past, sounding a bit more pliable, I guess you could say, saying he'd accept a pathway to citizenship for them, but still wants money for his wall. Take a listen.
We're going to morph into it. It's going to happen at some point in the future.
Morph into it?
Over a period of 10 to 12 years, somebody does a great job. They've worked hard. It gives incentive to do a great job, but they've worked hard. They've done terrifically, whether they have a little company or whether they work or whatever they're doing. If they do a great job, I think it's a nice thing to have the incentive of, after a period of years, being able to become a citizen.
How many years, Mr. President?
We're looking at 10 or 12.
10 or 12 years?
If there's no agreement by March 5th, are you going to protect them? Are you going to extend the deadline?
Yeah, I might do that.
How much do you need for your wall, Mr. President? $20 billion?
Well, I'm going to build it way under budget but we're putting down $25 billion for the wall.
Should these dreamers be concerned that they could be deported on March 5th if a deal is not reached?
I tell them not to be concerned, okay?
They have nothing to be concerned.
Tell them not to worry about it. We're going to solve the problem.
Clarify one thing, Mr.
Now, it's up to the Democrats, but they should not be concerned.
Can we just clarify one thing?
We're going to put it in a fund, $25 billion in a fund.
But you need it all up front.
We have $25 billion for a wall. We have $5 billion for other security measures. After DACA is done, we will look at the overall immigration.
But you still want chain migration lottery as part of the
We're going to put in the initial. We're putting chain, a negotiated chain. We're putting a replacement for lottery or an end to lottery, and it could be a replacement. We bring people in from various countries that come in based on merit and various other reasons. And we are going to build a wall. So those three primary things.
Well, all this against the background of that deadline of February 8th when the government again is supposed to run out of money. Senate Majority Leader McConnell indicating he'd be open to some sort of dreamer legislation. Senator Bernie Sanders is with me now. Senator Sanders, you heard the president saying tonight that he's open to citizenship for dreamers over the course of maybe 10 or 12 years, that it would morph into that for any dreamers out there that you shouldn't be concerned. Do you think they should take the president at his word at this point? And what do you think of what he said?
Unfortunately, Anderson, as I think most Americans know, the president says one thing today, another thing tomorrow, depending on who got to him last. Sadly, the president lies a whole lot of times. But it is important to understand that we have a moral crisis in front of us. We have 800,000 young people who came to this country when they were 2 or 3 years of age. They know no other country. They are working. 20,000 of them are teachers. They're in school. They're in the military. This is their home. And the idea that they could lose the legal status that Trump took away from them and face deportation would be an incredible moral stain on this country. 80% of the American people think that we should maintain legal status for these young people, and the vast majority of Americans think there should be a path towards citizenship. Now, the good news is that Senator Durbin and Senator Graham have crafted legislation, not what I would write, but it's a decent piece of legislation which provides legal status to the dreamers. It has now, we think, 6 or 7 Republicans who are supporting it. That means we have 56, 57 members of the United States Senate who are supporting it. We think we have a strong majority in the House who are supporting it. This is what the American people want, and I hope Trump will support that effort. As you know, the White House has said they're going to unveil what they want on Monday of next week. Clearly, what they call chain migration is on the table of rethinking, some sort of lottery or the lottery program and $25 billion for the border wall. Is that something you and Democrats would support if it meant a permanent solution for dreamers? Well, let me just say this. I think a wall made a whole lot of sense in the 15th century when China built the Great Wall. I think what most security experts understand is that you can protect the border in a much more cost-effective way with modern technology. So if we want to save money, if we want to protect the border, there are ways to do it other than the wall that Trump is proposing, which the vast majority of the American people, by the way, do not want. And it is, in my view, a waste of money. But at the end of the day, what is absolutely imperative is that we protect these young people. There'll be a lot of negotiations, and I look forward to seeing the day come sooner than later where these 800,000 young people do not have to live in the kind of anxiety and fear that they're living in today. So for you, that's the number one priority in an immigration deal? Dreamers? Yes, it is. It is. But what I also want to say, and I think sometimes we push it aside, when we talk about the budget crisis that we're facing, the United States of America, Anderson, has a $4 trillion government, $4 trillion. We are now into the 4th continuing resolution. We're going to go on 5 months in which a $4 trillion government says, we will spend money exactly this year the way we spent it last year. Can you think of a large business like Amazon saying, we'll do exactly the same that we did last year, same priorities. they would lose tens of billions of dollars, probably go bankrupt. You cannot run a government in an ever-changing world, all kinds of crises, and say, oh, we're going to do exactly what we did last year. So one of the reasons I voted against this continuing resolution is we have major crises facing this country. We have 27 million people in the community health center program. That program has not been reauthorized for 3.5 months. People are going to lose their ability to get health care and dental care. It's a crisis. We have 30,000 vacancies in the Veterans Administration. Veterans are not going to be able to get the quality and timely care that they need. We have a massive underfunding and understaffing of the Social Security Administration. People who are old, people with disabilities cannot get the service they need. We have got to address those problems now.
The fact that Minority Leader Schumer says that talks are starting over in his term and that funding for the wall is off the table now, is that helpful? Because the president seems to be very clear that if there is no wall, there is no DACA.
Well, we will see how the negotiations go. I think what Schumer was upset about is that he and Trump sat down, and I think Schumer felt that they had reached an agreement and that once again Trump pulled the rug out from underneath them. But bottom line is there needs to be negotiations. I think there are serious Republicans here who want to do the right thing, and we've got to work together to make sure that these young people get the legal status that they need and have a path towards citizenship.
Senator Sanders, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ahead, the White House attorney has reportedly had a different talk on whether President Trump will do an interview with Special Counsel Robert Mueller, a different take, I should say. The details on that. Reaction to all this from former CIA Director General Michael Hayden. President Trump told reporters tonight that he's looking forward to talking to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We played that at the top of the broadcast, that he said he'd love to do it and he'd do it under oath. This didn't take long. Now, according to the New York Times, a White House lawyer is already walking that back. White House lawyer Ty Cobb told the Times that the president was speaking fast and only meant to say he was willing to meet with the Mueller team, not volunteering to testify under oath. Former CIA Director Michael Hayden joins us now. So, General Hayden, first off, your reaction to the breaking news that President Trump said he wanted to talk to Special Counsel Mueller under oath as long as his attorneys were fine with it.
Yeah, I thought it was not just breaking news, Anderson, but good news. And look, there's a cloud over the presidency. We can debate why there's a cloud, but there's no doubt there's a cloud. And both the president and America will be well served by getting out from under this cloud. And I see no way that we do that to the satisfaction of most Americans until the president talks to Bob Mueller. Now, will he do it with the advice of counsel? Of course. No one should talk to the Bureau without their lawyer in the room. I understand that. There's jeopardy. But I think the president's instincts, which he seemed to suggest today, was that I got to go do this. Those are the right instincts.
But it is extraordinary when, for those who have raised concerns, well, if the president is just speaking on the record under oath to the special counsel, who knows what he may say if he's, goes off on a tangent. The example being tonight talking to reporters, minutes later, some hour later, his attorney is already walking back what the president himself said in just a 15-minute Q&A with reporters. There's really no telling what the president might say under oath.
No, I understand that. But I also have a great deal of respect for Director Mueller and his team. I think they'll be very disciplined, and they'll demand that the president answer the questions. And what the president says will matter no matter what kind of intervention that the president's lawyers might say. I mean, there's an old standing joke in the Air Force. What the captain meant to say is that's not going to hold water. What the president says is going to matter.
In the course of the same interview tonight, the president also cast doubt on the FBI as a whole, saying he's, quote, disturbed and that these missing texts are worse than Watergate. He was asked point blank either if he had confidence in or if he trusted the FBI. I can't remember the exact question. And he didn't answer. He didn't say that he did. What do you think? I mean, that does aid to the morale of the FBI, but also just does it do real damage to the FBI?
That's the real point, Anderson. Morale matters. Personal integrity matters. The feelings of people who go out there in harm's way every day for America matters. But fundamentally, what matters is the health of the institutions on which our democracy relies for both its safety and its liberty. That's the intelligence community. That's the Department of Justice. That's the FBI. And as this circle has tightened, you've seen the president and a lot of supporters of the president almost reflexively attacking the integrity of these institutions. And I fear greatly, no matter how this turns out, Anderson, we're going to harm these bodies on which we must rely. You know, whatever happens to the Bureau right now, we're going to need it again in the future. And so we should be very careful not to damage it.
It's also kind of incredible. This is coming from the Republican side, which is traditionally very strong on supporting law enforcement at, state, local, and certainly federal level. This is a day after, Republican Senator Ron Johnson was spreading rumors about secret societies within the FBI having off-site meetings and saying that, that they had an informer who is confirming. This is all based on that one text allegedly sent by that FBI agent.
Yeah. Look, I've spoken with Senator Johnson in the past. I've always found him to be a very serious man, very dedicated to the United States. And Anderson, there's a bit of difference in both content and tone from what Senator Johnson said yesterday and what he's saying today.
Yeah, he seemed to back off the idea that there was an informer who confirmed this secret society notion.
And I was really struck a little bit ago on your show where Congressman Dent, a Republican from Pennsylvania, was really trying to calm the waters here, saying we all need to settle down here and quit reflexively attacking these institutions. That actually was very heartening coming from a Republican.
It is just such again, if one had heard this rhetoric coming from the left a few years ago, it wouldn't be surprising, about the FBI or about the idea that there was a, cabal within the FBI. But again, coming from the Republicans, it just seems that we're in uncharted waters here.
I'm sorry, I'm smiling a bit with you, Anderson, because I've actually heard that rhetoric from the left when I was in government. The kind of the presumption of guilt, the presumption that there was some nefarious activity going on from the extreme American left. And we generally got a pass, and that's not always a good thing from the American right. I mean, institutions need to be held up to the light of day. But you're right. Number one, it's a bit unusual coming from the right. And actually the almost viciousness of the attack is really unusual from either right or left.
Yeah. General Hayden, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching 360. It is time to hand it over to Chris Cuomo for Cuomo Prime Time.